politics. Governors, senators, congressmen. No wonder nothing ever gets done.
That's what we're going to fix, Mr. Zartan.
As a devout G.I. Joe fan, Zartan has always been a special and intriguing character. We think the weirdest thing about him is that his whole origin story begins with missing information, and there remains an air of mystery around this character, which makes him the perfect villain. The earliest concept around Zartan is more a weaponized enigma rather than a detailed biography, and the classic material keeps his background vague and his real name unknown. Most people are familiar with this character as someone who's a master of disguise and has suspected elite European training, but beyond the basics, it all goes dark. However, as always, there's more to it than meets the eye, and aside from the popular cartoon hits and movie appearances, there are some underrated comic books and shows that dive deeper into Zartan's origins. In this video, we're going to be exploring every single one of Zartan's backstories across all the different continuities in media, and you'll understand what makes him such an integral part of the G.I. Joe franchise. Ready to find out what makes Zartan such a dreaded villain and what his motivations really are? Let's hop on in, because it's going to be a good one. Marvel's Zartan, the hired killer who changed Snake Eye's life. In Marvel's A Real American Hero continuity, Zartan has a lot of significance, and we thought this would be a good place to start. While he doesn't get a detailed childhood backstory, he's still crucial to the G.I. Joe mythology, especially when Cobra Commander hires him to kill Snake Eyes. Yeah, as you can imagine, things get pretty intense here, and the comic series establishes him as a terrifying opponent. We love the introduction to Zartan, as it says Stan Lee presents Zartan, and you immediately know it's going to be an epic character. The scene takes us to San Francisco Bay, where G.I. Joe forces are off to Alcatraz Island, the high-security prison where they're bringing Storm Shadow, which has a record of never being breached by any of the inmates. However, Storm Shadow is confident as ever that he can break out of it. Meanwhile, Cobra Commander, Destro, and the Baroness are in the Florida Everglades, where Cobra Commander introduces the others to his new friend. A man appears on a jet ski, and the commander reveals that he calls himself Zartan. They proceed to Zartan's headquarters, which looks like a rundown hut, but is actually filled with fancy high-tech interiors. Zartan tells the Baroness about how he's been tracking her, and we gotta tell ya, this version of Zartan has a rather unique look. He's got long red hair, and he wears these dark masks that cover his eyes. During an interaction with another Cobra operative, Zartan goes to shake his hand, and Baroness and Destro are shocked to see that his arm is absorbing the camouflage pattern of Firefly. This reveals that he's capable of changing color and surface patterns like a chameleon, and the Cobra Commander calmly remarks that it's only one of his many talents. Next, it's shown that Zartan commands his own men, and he's a pretty ruthless leader who only cares about victory. They have a sinister plan to free the captured Storm Shadow, but things don't work out immediately, and Baroness is not impressed. She points out that while she and Destro have proven their worth to the Cobra cause, Zartan is yet to do so. Cobra Commander agrees and says that Zartan must prove his loyalty, and he can start with the G.I. Joe raid at his secret hideout. Of course, he aces every challenge thrown at him, and Zartan turns out to be an expert strategist and combatant. Another story arc shows just how powerful and battle-hardened he is when he gets into a fight after waking up on a hospital bed. He single-handedly takes down multiple G.I. Joes, and who can forget the narrative where he's tasked with killing Snake Eyes. He infiltrates the Arashikage compound under false pretenses and accidentally kills the Hard Master instead of Snake Eyes using Storm Shadow's arrow. This comic series makes one thing very clear about Zartan. He's one of the deadliest Cobra operatives and can never take him lightly. IDW Zartan Origins: the street thief reborn as a human disaster. We chose this particular backstory next because not only is it insightful, it also exposes the true nature of his special abilities. His masterful disguise is shown as a curse, and his body is extremely unstable. Moreover, IDW adds one of his wildest reinventions, where he starts off as an orphaned pickpocket who takes the name Zartan from a movie poster. From such humble beginnings, he gets quite a bit of character development, so let's get into the details of that before we spoil it all. The comic series is titled G.I. Joe Origins, and it's written by Larry Hama. Released in 2009, the comic series has an interesting narrative, but we're going to focus on the part that explores the origins of Zartan. He's described as Cobra's deadliest assassin, who's a master of infiltration and misdirection. It's suggested that he's Cobra's secret asset who works from the shadows, and he's unleashed when someone under Cobra's control attempts to go against their wishes. The badass introduction also says that he can strike whenever and wherever, and he's an ever-present threat for his enemies. We can't even think of a cooler entry than the one Zartan pulls off here, as a Cobra helicopter flies dangerously close to an aircraft. Before you know it, Zartan jumps off onto the aircraft and he breaks in almost effortlessly. He makes quick work of the guards on board before cornering President Rumanapar. It's so impressive the way Zartan single-handedly takes down the armed guards in a matter of seconds, and he lays out a laptop before the president after informing him that the journey will continue as planned. A Cobra operative then tells the president that she thought he had an accord with Cobra regarding trade barriers, and she has found out that he plans to announce a shift in his country's policies in London. She forces him to agree to the current policies, or Zartan will throw him from the plane. Of course, he has no choice but to agree, and she tells him that Zartan will now accompany him to the summit as his escort to make sure that he follows through with his promise. By the time they get off the aircraft, Zartan has changed into regular clothes fitting of the president's bodyguard as he shadows the president. Cobra's mission is accomplished, and Zartan gets €1 million for his daring stunt. He's also offered the company of a pretty lady to enjoy the evening, and that evening he heads to a casino and gets into a fight with someone who tries to hit on the woman. Sadly, she doesn't appreciate his efforts and aggression and calls him an animal before walking away. That night, as Zartan lies in his bed, a flashback shows a past life. It's revealed that he used to be an orphan who stole from tourists, and the cops cornered him and interrogated him. He made up the name Zartan instantly from a movie poster. Even as a kid, he was a feisty young boy, and he manages to elbow a cop in the face and runs away. Suddenly, the scene cuts to the present where he gets attacked by some people in his hotel room, but Zartan is far too good and well-trained, and the attackers don't stand a chance. It turns out that Cobra isn't happy about the attention that Zartan has drawn to himself. The Cobra handler from earlier, Baroness, then offers him an opportunity to serve as the subject of an experiment conducted by Mars Industries. They were working on an experimental weapon, and Baroness takes Zartan to Buenos Aires on a private plane to serve as her representative. It starts off simple as Zartan is asked to put on a tight experimental suit as he's assigned to assassinate a target, but the mission goes horribly wrong because something goes wrong with the suit. Destro, who's working on the project, informs Baroness that they might have lost Zartan because the experiment didn't work as planned and he might have been turned into inert molecules. The next part brings another twist, and it makes you wonder who Zartan really is. Through genetic experiments and special technology, the Cobra scientists managed to create an exact replica of him. The process is extremely painful, and the new Zartan starts from scratch, learning the basics and ways of life. However, his progress is remarkably fast, and he also possesses the ability to look like anyone he wants. Later, he uses his shape-shifting skills to escape from the facility by posing as the man who brought him food. Now in the outside world, all by himself, he could be anyone or anywhere. The pursuit doesn't end well, and we see one more instance of Zartan just transforming into a celebrity to mislead the guards chasing him. Eventually, he comes back to the facility after taking them down because he wants to know more about the actual Zartan from the scientist in charge, Dr. Tagak, in order to become, well, Zartan. Even though Tagak points out that he's now only an empty vessel who looks like Zartan, the latter is convinced that there's more to it because he can function just like the real-life Emil Zartan could. He's confident that he can be greater than the older version of Zartan. He negotiates directly with the Cobra commander. He says that now, with his newfound skill of turning into anyone he wants, he'd be an asset to Cobra. In return, he would want his freedom. He also wants his own unit within Cobra, which will be made up of people that he chooses. Lastly, he wants to make sure that only he and the Cobra commander know his secret. Dr. Tagak is shot dead, and Zartan rises as the dreaded version that we're familiar with. He goes home, and there's even a fitting climax for his badass origin, where he meets the cop who apprehended him as a kid and kills him with a powerful hit to the neck. This was more than enough to paint Zartan as a ruthless adversary, a hardened Cobra operative, and one of the very best agents they have. Sunbow's Zartan, the swamp phantom with the blue skin curse. Well, this continuity comes with a very different narrative around Zartan compared to the one we just explained. That said, the Sunbow animated series became widely popular, so we can tell you that more people are probably familiar with this version. The cartoon doesn't dig deep into who Zartan was before he became a key Cobra operative. In fact, it establishes him through a strong visual gimmick where he's a disguise expert who uses masks, makeup, and vocal mimicry to pose as someone else. Initially, he was shown changing his skin color to blend into the environment, and sunlight was a weakness because it turned him blue. However, the show backtracked on this last bit, even though there is an action figure like this, which we'll come back to later in this video. It all starts with the miniseries G.I. Joe: The Revenge of Cobra, and these 5 episodes give you a fair idea about the true nature of Zartan. This is basically Zartan's Sunbow introduction arc, and the first episode, titled In the Cobra's Pit, shows you who he really is. It tells the story of a daring Cobra mission where the Cobra commander himself leads them to take an experimental laser core from a G.I. Joe security convoy. The attempt is successful, but Cobra commander is captured even as the others get away with the laser core. They hold the commander at the Blackwater prison facility in the swamps, and as Colonel Sharp heads there, he's ambushed by Zartan and the Dreadnoks. He gets captured, and Zartan pulls off the perfect disguise by posing as the Colonel. He infiltrates the holding facility easily, along with the Baroness, who also disguises herself as Dr. Gassel, and the Cobra commander escapes with their help. Destro doesn't approve of Zartan because he's just a mercenary, but the truth is that he quickly becomes one of the commander's most trusted soldiers. Zartan always backs up the commander's decisions, such as when he decides to use the Weather Dominator against Washington, D.C. in the next episode, titled The Vines of Evil. Then, in the episode titled The Palace of Doom, Cobra Commander explains that the Hydromaster has landed somewhere on the island of no return, and he orders the Baroness and Zartan to recover the piece. Zartan is always portrayed as someone in the show who can square off against the Joes and give them a hard time. The next episode, called Battle on the Roof of the World, also explores the daring nature of Zartan as he observes Spirit from a submarine with his Dreadnoks. He then fires a torpedo at the island, where Spirit is climbing the side of a cliff, and the Cobra agents following Spirit are unable to get to him. But why would he want a Joe like Spirit to win, and why is he fighting against the Cobras? Zartan explains that when his Dreadnoks are confused, they're first and foremost on their own side, and he has bigger plans. This shows that his loyalty to Cobra Commander is conditional and only for the sake of his own benefit. He truly is a mercenary who works for himself, and on this occasion, he ends up helping the Joes because it suits him. His real game is only revealed in the final episode of the miniseries titled Amusement Park of Terror. He holds up in an abandoned carnival and broadcasts his demands to both the Joes and Cobra forces. They track the transmission to his base, and Zartan constantly detects the Joe and Cobra forces. Eventually, the laser threat is dealt with, and Zartan and his Dreadnoks are forced to run, but he's caught by Destro. He's brought before Cobra Commander for his betrayal, but the commander forgives Zartan because he has what he wants. Even he's smart enough to know that Zartan is a handy mercenary to have under control, and Destro ends up being the one who looks like an idiot when Zartan is forgiven. Next, we'd like to draw your attention to an episode called Jungle Trap, and it's quite significant because it's the last episode that still shows Zartan's early Sunbow gimmick, where he can blend into the background and is negatively impacted by sunlight, which turns him blue and blows his cover. This is a crucial detail in early cartoon adaptations of Zartan. This episode starts off with the kidnapping of a famous scientist named Dr. Shakur by the Cobra forces, helped by Zartan. He sneaks in as a snake charmer to serve as a spy for the Cobra commander, and the attack at the right time gets Dr. Shakur captured. Cobra wants him to help in building the Vulcan machine, which can use the world's lava to terrorize cities. Zartan puts a mind control device on Shakur to make him obey their orders, and later, when the Joes come up to their location, Zartan uses the scientist as a human shield. Scarlet, one of the Joes, blasts a hole in the ceiling, revealing sunlight, and this drives Zartan away, showing his weakness. He's later shown to be extremely frustrated by how sunlight weakens him, and his defeat in the episode comes because of this chink in his armor as the scientist is rescued. There's one other episode that deserves to be mentioned in this regard, and this is because it introduces Xandar and Zarana with Zartan in this continuity. We're talking about the Arise Serpentor Arise story arc here. We find it interesting how the Dreadnoks are brought into the narrative. It's revealed how Zartan selects his Dreadnoks, even though there is a slight continuity error here. When he starts the Dreadnok edition, he says that there's only one rule. Whoever's left standing will be the new Dreadnok. However, when Monkey Wrench wins the audition by blowing everyone else up, Zartan accuses him of cheating. Also, in one instance, Zartan's sister, Zarana, tricks the Joes, and she diverts their attention to steal what she's supposed to. We're not going to get into the details of this 5-episode story arc, but it's easily among the best in the series. G.I. Joe Dreadnok's Declassified finally gives him a past. If someone asked what the most important G.I. Joe story arc is in terms of detailing Zartan's past, we'd have to point to this one, as it's easily one of the most compelling and mysterious stories in the G.I. Joe lore featuring Zartan. The 3-issue comic series also dives into the history of the Dreadnoks, and you can see the entire gang in action as they establish themselves as the meanest and deadliest threat to the Joes. The backstory begins in Florida, and it's revealed that Zartan had 2 siblings, a brother and a sister. His father got off on the wrong foot with some crook after he couldn't pay back the money he had taken, and he also couldn't deliver the product he was supposed to create, so the childhood of Zartan was troubled because he had an absentee father who was also a bit of a crook. Even his mother was a French actress, which meant that work and rehearsals kept her busy. It suggested that, as a kid, Zartan needed some medication to keep him calm, and without that medication, he became extremely restless. Then came the big tragedy, where his parents were killed by thugs after they found out that his father was actually trying to kill the man he had borrowed from. The 3 siblings ended up in a care home, but Zartan's troubles were far from over. After taking on a bully in the facility, he escaped, leaving his worried siblings behind, who later got adopted. Meanwhile, Zartan took to a life of petty crime for a crime lord before ripping him off and running away to join the army with a new name, Luke McKinney. Later, he went on to work as an assassin and a mercenary, and he used his disguise abilities to good effect, but what really changed him was a government agency under Amaury Sanderson because he underwent a top-secret genetic experiment which infused him with chameleon DNA. This gave him the ability to blend into his background easily, and later, we see him during an arms deal with Destro. Amaury meets the leader of a motorcycle gang, who's revealed to be Zartan, and now you see the familiar face with the black eye masks. Amaury joined the Dreadnoks and reunited with Zartan's brother, Xandar, and sister Zarana, who later teamed up with their brother to fight a mutiny in the ranks. But finally, Amaury fought and overpowered the leader and his rivals, and the likes of Buzzer, Torch, and Ripper killed the leader. Thus, the original Zartan was killed, and following this, Amaury assumed his identity. G.I. Joe Resolute, where Zartan is stripped down to pure malice. This anime-influenced adult animated series wasn't meant for kids, and this means that they could twist the character of Zartan considerably and add some dark and grim themes. What we like most about this version of Zartan is that the narrative takes off the carnival mask and reveals a killer. He's depicted as a ruthless mercenary who enjoys killing people, and he openly admits to this. It's a colder interpretation of the character, but there is little mystery around him. Also, we don't think this version adds much in terms of his backstory because it pushes him to an executioner rather than a prankster or a swamp freak working for Cobra. This story is about Cobra's attempt to blackmail world governments into signing off their resources because they threaten to destroy their major cities if they don't comply. In fact, as a show of strength and to prove they're not bluffing, they blow up Moscow and kill millions in the process. Finally, 3 separated Joe teams are deployed in order to contain the situation. Zartan led a security force team for Cobra, but he was only a mercenary and not a part of the organization. They managed to infiltrate the location, and Zartan is caught up in a fight with them, during which he's seemingly killed. The death sequence stands out for us because he's given a chance to leave because he's not a part of Cobra, continues to fight, which prompts Scarlet and Duke to shoot him in the back. Another memorable part of the narrative comes during a flashback sequence where Snake Eyes recalls his time as a student when he tried to prevent the assassination of his mentor at the hands of Zartan, but failed. Back then, Zartan was working under Storm Shadow, and it shows that he'll work for just about anyone for the right price. However, it's not clear if this version of Zartan has the Dreadnoks working for him because they don't appear or get mentioned in the narrative. Despite that, we still think this is the best representation of his personality, where he's a mercenary who's not loyal to Cobra or the Joes.
Don't give up!
Sigma 6, the tech-based Zartan. It's time to move past the mystical biology and makeup skills because Zartan's story evolves in this one. His power comes from hologram generators built into his suit, and this marks a major change because it shifts the character from the mutant weirdness portrayed earlier. Here, what you get is gadget-based stealth, and we would say that the franchise is modernizing him for a more toy-based, anime-influenced era at this point. It makes one thing pretty clear: the franchise isn't scared to change his source of power in different story arcs. In Sigma 6, he still remains an invaluable asset for Cobra and the leader of the Dreadnoks, just a little more tech-savvy. His first appearance in the animated series comes in the second episode titled Escape, when Zartan and the Dreadnoks are sent by Destro to free Cobra Commander. It's remarkable to see this new version of Zartan, where his built-in costume not only makes him a master of disguise, but also shows his powerful side as he attacks the enemies. In the seventh episode, titled Jungle, Zartan discovers a powerful mystical stone known as a Power Stone deep within a dense jungle. Zartan attempts to harness the stone's immense energy to empower Cobra's bats, or battle android troopers, making them nearly invulnerable weapons of destruction. This ends up backfiring. The supercharged bats turn against both Cobra forces and the G.I. Joe Sigma 6 team, creating chaos for everyone involved. Snake Eyes and Spirit track Zartan to the jungle site, leading to an intense close-quarters fight showcasing Snake Eyes' skills against Zartan's cunning disguises and agility. The Joes ultimately thwart Zartan, reclaim the Power Stone, and neutralize the threat from the rogue bats. He might be on the losing side this time, but it's still enough to prove how much of a threat he and his henchmen pose.
What is this?
Renegades, the biker warlord version. G.I. Joe Renegades also brings in an interesting version of Zartan, who's first introduced in the episode titled Dreadnok's Rising. He's portrayed as the leader of the Dreadnoks, and later he also appears in episodes like Knockoffs and Cutting Edge. His talent for impersonating people's voices is remarkable, and the story shows how he terrorizes a local town along with his Dreadnoks. When they capture a woman named Wendy, Snake Eyes has to go and rescue her, and the other G.I. Joe members follow and reach the town to fight Zartan and his men. The action-packed narrative shows how Zartan is defeated and arrested by Sheriff Terry. In due time, he's used to lead Flint and Lady J to track down the Joes. In one instance, he breaks into a Cobra van and arms himself with a chameleon-type wrist device that enables him to mask his appearance by taking the form of anyone he wants. He disguises himself as Duke and tries to confuse the Joes, but the real Duke arrives and Snake Eyes eventually takes down Zartan after recognizing a different heartbeat than Duke. The suit malfunctions and leaves black burns around his eyes, and he's taken back to prison. The Baroness plans to get him out of jail, but overall, we have to say that this version of Zartan is probably a little less intimidating because of how often he gets captured and arrested. Zartan from the live-action films. Disguise expert to presidential usurper. Well, you didn't think the live-action movies would leave out Zartan, did you? The movies might not have made everyone happy, but the role of Zartan, played by Arnold Vosloo, was quite impressive. We love how the film dares to ask what happens if the Master of Disguise actually wins, because the first film shows Zartan winning against the Joes and establishing absolute dominance. He appeared in the movie G.I. Joe: The Rise of Cobra, and this appearance was very different from his television counterpart. The story revolves around a new nanotech-based weapons system that can devour any non-organic material rapidly. Cobra forces have their eyes on the system, but it remains guarded in the G.I. Joe Command Center in Egypt. Storm Shadow and the Baroness, with the help of Zartan, infiltrate the G.I. Joe base, and the warheads are stolen. The action-packed film has plenty of twists and turns, but perhaps the biggest surprise comes at the very end, when Zartan has his physical appearance altered by nanomites. He assumes the identity of the President of the United States and infiltrates the White House, suggesting ominous signs for the future of the world. Arnold Vosloo reprises his role as Zartan in the 2013 sequel titled G.I. Joe Retaliation, and here his role is much larger. He's still the President of the US without anyone having a clue about his real identity. He finds an excuse to label the G.I. Joe forces as traitors and even bombs them, killing several Joes, including Duke. He announces that Cobra Forces will be the premier U.S. Special Forces team, replacing the Joes. This is when Lady J deduces that someone's impersonating the president because she notices the change in his speech patterns. She gets this confirmed during a presidential fundraiser when she steals a sample of his DNA and learns he's actually Zartan. Meanwhile, Zartan threatens the security of the entire planet as he unveils Project Zeus, which is an orbital kinetic bombardment weapon designed for Cobra. He even destroys central London and he only agrees to disarm if all world leaders submit to Cobra. Then comes another twist where Storm Shadow manages to kill Zartan and Colton kills Xandar before rescuing the real president with Lady J. His disguise fades away after he's killed, and the story also reveals how he raised Storm Shadow as a ruthless assassin. It's a happy ending as the real president commemorates the Joes, and the Cobra plan is foiled for now.
What is this?
You've probably gathered that while Zartan's details keep changing across continuities, the core character remains unchanged. Almost every version has three things in common. Number 1, he's tied to disguise and impersonation. Number 2, he's extremely useful to Cobra as an infiltrator and assassin. And 3, he thrives on his unstable identity. Of course, he gets a variety of different powers, from acting and mimicry skills to tech-based powers and mutations, but we think what makes him so memorable in such an extensive lore is the impact he has on the stories. While Storm Shadow's origins keep on changing because his tragedy changes, Zartan's backstory keeps changing because his face is never supposed to stay the same. We hope to see more of this badass adversary in future G.I. Joe franchise projects, and we think every G.I. Joe fan will agree. Let us know in the comments down below what you think of this iconic character and his wide range of backstories, and also let us know which one's your favorite. As always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons because they help us a lot in bringing you more of this kind of content, and we really like to do it. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and we'll see ya in the next one. Bye for now.